Martin McGuinness, good morning.
Good morning, Ray. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Now, firstly, explain this thing that was in the papers earlier in the week. The round tower made of matchsticks.
Well, I made that when I was in Portlaoise prison. It's hard to believe now, almost 40 years ago.
40 years ago?
I made it for a friend of mine, Father Jamie Shields, who was from Derry City but was parish priest in a number of parishes in County Donegal. He used to come and see me in prison, and he and I were always very close friends. We were neighbours, and I made the round tower. And I have to say, it came as a big surprise to me just a couple of weeks ago when I'd heard it had been preserved in such pristine condition, and that his family were offering it up for auction in Dublin. And even more surprised when I saw what it went for.
5,200.
5,200 or 300.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. And it just matchsticks, and then you lacquered it, so it's gold in colour.
Yeah.
What height was it about?
I suppose it's about something around just over a foot.
Right.
But
and that was part of
it takes a lot of patience.
That was part of arts and crafts in Portlaoise prison.
Yeah, we used to do all of that, make Celtic crosses and round towers and churches and things like that. It was great pastime. And
what age were you when you were in Portlaoise?
Well, I was on the Curragh military detention in 1973 for IRA membership, and I was again arrested in 1974, and I was brought to Portlaoise. So I was in
that for IRA membership as well? Yeah,
I was in the Curragh for 6 months, and then I was in Portlaoise for a year.
Right. Two prisons that are very close to me. I lived in Kildare Town, which is only 4 miles from the Curragh camp. So I suppose as a kid we were very aware that you were up the road. Yeah,
well, I mean, I was very young. I was 23 years of age at the time.
But it struck fear into me as I would have been 10. And I was actually fearful, and probably had a couple of nightmares as well, military style nightmares, that there were terrorists coming over the back gate. Yeah. You know, how do you feel about the fact that, you 23-year-old, struck fear into a 10-year-old,
Well, I mean, I'm very sorry to hear.
Right, that you gave me nightmares.
I apologise.
Right. Well, we'll get back to that in a moment. But firstly, just, I suppose it's fair to ask you the same questions that I asked the other candidates. So why do you want to be President of Ireland?
Because I want to inspire people. I want to make a difference. And I want to do a number of things. I think Ireland has been through a disgraceful period of selfishness and greed. And I would hope that I'm not a selfish person. I'm not a greedy person. I lead a very humble lifestyle. In my position as Deputy First Minister in the North, I earned something in the region of £112,000 a year. That went to Sinn Féin, and I was given a subsistence out of that of a few £100 a week. Quite happy that the rest of it will go to the party for party building. And I think, given the amount of selfishness and greed, we need to step forward and we need to show people that it is absolutely unacceptable the size of the wages that some people are being paid, the size of the bonuses that people are being paid, and the pensions that people are being paid at the highest level of Irish society. So the ordinary man and woman who are finding it the toughest in the course of this recession need to see that there's someone with a bit of principle who's prepared to stand up and say, as I have said, that the vast bulk of the presidential salary will go back to the people of Ireland.
So you say that you're going to take the average industrial wage.
The average wage, which is probably smaller than the average industrial wage, the average wage is good enough for me. And what I have asked my campaign team to consider, and we will consider very, very seriously, the prospect of the rest of the salary being used to employ at least 6 young people. And we'll do that in consultation and discussions with others. So,
would you have any idea how much the presidency costs the state? The running of Ors and Uachtaráin,
I'm sure.
State cars.
I'm sure it's a huge amount of money, and I think that any future president needs to take account of the absolutely terrible circumstances that many people who are living from day to day are experiencing at the moment. So it's about leading by example, and it's about trying to show people that there are people within society who are prepared to do things and stand with the ordinary man and woman against the backdrop of the very difficult circumstances. But that's not the only thing I want to do.
Well, here's the thing, because I've said it to all and it applies very much to you, because you're a doer. Your life from the age of very young age, you're involved in civil rights movement, and then the IRA and Sinn Féin. You've been a doer. You've achieved things in the peace process, etc. We'll get back to that. But would you not be bored for 7 years as the president?
No, I think
because in a lot of ways your hands are tied as to what you can do and as to what you can say.
Well, I think if you look at what Mary Robinson done in her time and what Mary McAleese and Martin have done in their time. I want to take that a step further. No, I would not be bored. I think that if I was elected President of Ireland, it would be a world news story for a whole lot of different reasons. And people will be hugely interested in seeing how I would conduct myself on behalf of the people of Ireland. And of course, I want the people of Ireland to be proud of me if I'm so lucky to be elected as their President. So I would be very anxious and keen to take forward the work that they have been doing, trying to attract foreign direct investment. For example, I've just come back from the United States, where I spent a week in Los Angeles, in Chicago, San Diego, and New York with Peter Robinson, trying to, and we've been very successful over the course of the last number of years in doing it. I want to do that for the whole of Ireland, and I think I could walk into any boardroom in the United States. We had, we were feted at the highest level by HBO, by Warner Brothers, by Sony when we were in Los Angeles. So I want to use, if you like, my international reputation for the benefit of all of the people of this island.
And you say, the President represents the people of Ireland, and it's obvious from the reaction since you announced your candidacy that a lot of people in Ireland wouldn't be comfortable with you representing them because of your past.
Well,
what's the reaction you've been getting?
There's certainly some people in the media.
No, but
Well, I have to say, Ray, I have been on the streets of Dublin, Cork and Kildare at the National Ploughing Championship in Cork the other day after the All-Ireland final, and I'm getting an absolutely fantastic reception from the ordinary man and woman in the street. So I'm greatly heartened and encouraged by the phenomenal response that there's been. And I think it is, the people of Ireland are fairer and much more just than those who would try to recriminate about my past. They will see me in the round where some people are looking for spectacular headlines.
Everyone's trying to get a punch at you. They're trying to get a body blow to you, aren't they? Yeah, but all of that being said,
not everybody. But
a lot of people are.
There are some journalists who have been very courageous.
They're trying to make a name for themselves, aren't they?
But there's still enough journalists out there who have made it absolutely clear that they don't agree with some of the opinions that have been expressed.
Well, this is my read of the situation. I'm 47. Born in 1964, so I grew up with the Troubles on the telly, but they were very much on the telly, and for the majority of people in the Republic of Ireland, that's the way it was. There were a number of notable exceptions, and obviously if you lived in the border counties, there was a lot more part of your life, but for the majority of us, it was at one remove. And now, when I said this to Gerry Adams when he was in, that now we have to sort of sort out how we feel about what you did. We didn't really have to justify it at a time or make sense of it. Well, I didn't as a teenager, but now I do. So I'm confronted by you, who was Chief of Staff at the IRA.
Well, that's not true.
Well, you were for a time when Gerry Adams was in prison.
Well, that isn't true. That's an accusation that has been levelled at me, which is
by Ed Maloney and Peter Taylor, and
absolutely untrue. But I mean,
well, who was Chief of Staff then when Gerry Adams was in prison in 1979?
I don't know who was Chief of Staff in 1979 because I wasn't in the area at that time. But what I do know is this.
But let's just get let's just get the timeline right on when you joined and when you left and what you did after that. So you joined the IRA in 1970.
Well, let's first of all talk about why I joined the IRA, because I think that's very, very important to put all of this in context. I grew up in a city where people were being treated as second-class citizens by the British government and by the Unionist administration in Belfast, where people... I was shocked when my father...
Can I just say, to put it in people's heads, so as a parallel... John Hume's experience, of growing up and in Derry is quite similar to yours. So just let's put that just as a...
was a very good loving Catholic. We went to Mass and Communion every day of his life. I was shocked when I saw my father march on the October the 5th civil rights protest, the first civil rights protest in the city, when people were beaten off the streets by the RUC. And of course, going through all of that and looking at the experiences, the way we were humiliated and degraded by the Unionist administration and their military forces, we then saw a situation where those civil rights marchers were effectively not just beaten off the streets, but murdered on the streets by the British Army and by the RUC. We saw the introduction of internment. We saw innocent people who were interned brought to interrogation centres and tortured by the British Army. We saw people brought up in helicopters thinking they were 6 mile high.
Before internment, there was violence coming from the IRA as well. You make it sound like before internment happened, there was violence coming from the national side as well.
Let me put it like this. Seamus Cusack and Desmond Beatty were both shot dead by the Royal Anglian Regiment on the Bogside before the IRA ever fired a shot. Sammy Devaney was beaten in his own house by the RUC and died a few weeks later.
You see, we will never know.
But let me make this point,
right,
because this is an important point. Whenever they shot 27 of us on Bloody Sunday, the people of Dublin went out and burned the British Embassy. We didn't have a British Embassy to burn. So many of us joined the IRA because we believed we had...
And some didn't.
And some didn't. And I respect the rights of those who didn't. I believe that we had a right to fight back against the British Army who were trying to humiliate us at that time.
Isn't there a problem? Like the IRA and Sinn Féin have sort of... They've never said it, exactly, but the implication is there that if the struggle didn't happen, that we wouldn't be where we are today. We will never know if John Hume and peaceful men had been left to their own devices without violence, whether things wouldn't have worked the way through. Like the question is, was there a need for violence? That's a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
And you were there in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And this is an important point for people because a lot of the people who are listening to our show won't have grown up with the troubles.
No, I understand that.
And see you as a statesman.
I hope I've contributed to that.
What?
I hope I've contributed
we don't
to
know.
The fact that they haven't grown up with the troubles.
We don't know.
Because I've been working for well over 20 years, along with people like John Hume and others, to bring about important change.
But Mark, this is a very simplistic question. Does all of that good work, and I don't think anybody disagrees with that, and everybody says, anything you read says, you are a great statesman and a great... But does that cancel out what came before? That's the question that people want answered.
I mean, history is something that people have to consider, not just in the context of how young people like myself reacted to the repression of the state. It was the same in South Africa, where young people joined military organisations set up by people like Nelson Mandela and fought back against apartheid. It's the same with the Palestinians, where people fight back against the denial of their own state. And wherever you go in the world, whether it's repression, whether it's injustice, whether it's discrimination or domination, young people will fight back. Some young people will choose not to fight back. But all that I know is that when this all began, I was treated as a second-class, even third-class citizen. And so
too were people like John Hume.
Yeah, but now I am the epitome of first-class citizenship, because I stand as a Deputy First Minister, a co-equal position with Peter Robinson in the Northern Executive. That's how things have changed.
If that is so important to you, why you turn your back on the people of Northern Ireland and coming down here and want to be President of the Republic?
Well, I can tell you there's great excitement in the North and the 6 counties about my candidature for the presidency of my country. So there's huge support for it. And it's against the backdrop of people knowing that I, along with Ian Paisley and Peter Robinson, have laid a very, very solid foundation, which is not going to be destroyed by small, unrepresentative armed groups who would wish to plunge us back into the past. So I'm very confident about that.
See, 3 reasons why you should be president. Is that what you were going to say?
I give the first two reasons in terms of standing alongside ordinary people, how I can use my reputation for the benefit of the people of Ireland in an economic sense at a time of great distress. But just as important as the other two is to continue with the fabulous work that Mary McAleese and Martin were involved in by ensuring that the RS continues to be an open house for loyalists, for unionists, for indeed the most marginalised within our society throughout the island of Ireland. And what I have received since my candidature in terms of the reaction of people who have been affected by the Troubles from all sections of the community, including people who lost loved ones, has been phenomenal. People who have went on the public record and said that they're absolutely delighted that I'm running for this position.
You brought it up because I don't know if you saw the Sunday Mail, but there's somebody who's gone on public record, Rose Hegarty, mother of Frank Hegarty. And in the article she claims, now for people who don't know the story of Frank Hegarty, he was in the IRA, but he was an informer. And after giving information about arms dumps in the Republic, he disappeared. And he was sort of given a different identity in England. Isn't that the story?
Well, the story came back, and I was elected.
But that's just to fill people in on that. And then the story here, Rose says...
The story was that he said at the time that he was kidnapped by British intelligence.
Right.
And taken away.
What Rose Hegarty, his mum, says is that you went to the family home, got down on your knees, and pleaded with her to ask her son to return home because he had left his children and his wife in Derry.
That's a total...
This is what she says.
Yeah.
He returned and then he was found dead. And the picture was on the cover of the Sunday Mail there.
Well, first of all, Mrs. Higgery, God rest her, is dead a number of years, so that isn't a quote from now.
No.
That's
she is quoted in it. She is quoted in it.
It's a total misrepresentation of what happened at that time. Now, I understand the grief of the Higgery family, but I'm not going to say anything in this programme which hurts them even more. And I could say a lot on this programme which would hurt them even more. I'm not going to do that. I think that would be very wrong to do that. But the story which you have read in the paper is a total misrepresentation of what happened at that time. I stood my first election in 1982. This happened in 1986. We were called into all sorts of situations which were occurring as a result of the continuation of conflict.
I'm confused, Martin, and you might sort it out for me, because all the times people say that you were the man who was going to be able to bring the hardliners along. You know, that the people, the men of violence, respected you, and they listened to what you had to say. Now, if you had that respect, it must have been because of something you had done over the years. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, Nelson Mandela was in prison in Robben Island and had little or no control over the African National Congress, yet he was able to use his enormous influence.
Well, I suppose I have to ask this question before we go to...
And I used my influence. I engaged with the IRA throughout all of that period. And remember, I did stand in my first election 30 years ago, next year. And isn't it incredible that the IRA ceasefire occurred over 17 years ago? So I've been working for
1994
20 years to bring about a cessation of conflict in the north, and more importantly to bring all sides to the negotiating table so that we could get an agreement that all of us on the island of Ireland could sign up to. So I think what we have done...
Has any of that got to do with... This is a very personal question. Has any of that got to do with Catholic guilt? That you wanted to make up for sins of the past?
No, it's got to do with... I mean,
you're a practicing Catholic.
Yeah, I'm absolutely. I do believe in...
And how do you square? How do you reconcile?
But I'm a very broad-minded Catholic.
Right.
You know, I respect the religion of everyone and those who have no religion whatsoever. And indeed, some of my closest friends are within the Protestant churches at the moment, and you would have seen some of them very publicly expressing their support for me in the course of recent times. So I think that, it's about... I'll tell you what actually happened in my head. I came to a conclusion as the vicious cycle of conflict and injustice and discrimination continued, violence and death also, that cycle had to be broken, and that we as Irish Republicans should face up to one big question. First of all, had the British Army the military capability of defeating the IRA? Well, British generals wrote theses for United Kingdom, as they call them, universities, where they said they couldn't defeat the IRA. That posed a big question for Republicans. Could the IRA militarily defeat the British Army? And if the answer to that was no, then there was a massive responsibility with those who had political authority and responsibility to use that to bring that cycle of conflict to an end.
That was you.
And that's why Gerry Adams and I, for over a very long period, met with the IRA, tried to convince people within the IRA that it would be a sensible thing to do to call not a bilateral ceasefire, a unilateral ceasefire, to do it on their own.
Yeah.
And our analysis was that if they did that would compel the British government and unionist leaders into a process of negotiations.
Okay.
And
now,
remember, we joined the talks in 1997. Within months, we had the Good Friday Agreement.
We're speaking to presidential candidate Martin McGuinness. Today is the first day that all 7 candidates will be in the same room.
Yeah, we're going to do a debate on RTE at 1 o'clock, so I'm looking forward to that very much indeed.
And then the Late Late Show on Friday night.
A late show on Friday night. I'm looking forward to that too also. I've been on the late on several times in the past.
Now, you're a practicing Catholic, and your faith is very important to you. I just find that hard to square that with your past, your history.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of people throughout the course of Irish history, whether it be during the 1916 Rising or the War of Independence, and indeed the conflict that has existed since partition, who were also practicing Catholics and who were able to square that with their willingness to stand up against those who were repressing the people that they came from. So, I think
there's something flawed then. the religion, or I don't know it doesn't make sense to me. Anyway,
as I said earlier, I'm very broad-minded. I don't claim that we have all the answers, and I certainly think that.
And you believe in God? You believe there's a God?
I do believe in God. Yeah, I do. I believe that there's somebody out there. I mean, who's responsible for this fantastic place that we live in?
And do you believe in forgiveness?
Yeah, I do believe in forgiveness. Yeah.
And do you go to confession?
I do go to confession, yeah. Not very often, but every now and again. I have to say, massively disillusioned by some of the stories. My father would be absolutely horrified at what we're listening to now as a result of the child abuse within some elements of the Catholic Church. Although I have to say, I have quite a lot of friends who are priests, who are very good and decent people, who themselves are heartbroken at the stories that they're hearing also.
Now, this is what the listeners have to say. 53102. I think Martin is one of the most honest politicians and has been upfront about everything, and it's easy for us to judge from the south what went on, yet most of us have huge sympathy for the people of Palestine. I hope Martin is elected. That's Mags. And could you ask Martin McGuinness the following question? If elected president, does he feel he can carry out all the ceremonial duties of the office, even though he refused to attend the state banquet for the Queen in May? Would he welcome back the Queen if she were to return? Lee in Mayo wants to know.
Yeah, I would, absolutely. As head of state of this country, I would be very glad to receive all of the foreign dignitaries who would wish to come here, including the Queen of England.
Was there an inkling when you refused that invitation that you would ever stand for the presidency?
Well, first of all, I didn't refuse the invitation.
Right. What happened?
Well, no invitation came.
No invitation came? For the
simple reason that people understood the difficulty that are presented for ourselves in the north. I mean,
so you were never invited.
I come from a city where the parachute regiment ran amok and shot 27 people. Prince Charles was the commander in chief of the parachute regiment. I had to think of the Bloody Sunday families. I had to think of the community in Derry. But do
you think about the over 600 families who lost civilians?
Yeah.
At the hands of the IRA over the years. Do you think about them?
I do, absolutely, and I think it was absolutely terrible that politicians failed, that there was so much discrimination.
But you can't blame politicians, Martin.
Well, it was a political failure. The fact that Ireland was partitioned, Ray, was a political failure. Yeah. We were condemned to live in the north and be treated as second and third class citizens by both the British government and the Unionist administration.
Do you ever think that, do you ever regret that you went down the violent route and not, say, the peaceful route like John Hume?
Well, I regret the fact that I had to do that, and I fully respect John Hume's position. We've worked with John, in building this peace process at the very beginning. But I'll just let you into a secret in relation.
It's hardly a secret. You're hardly going to say it on national radio, Martin. But go on anyway.
Well, I've been told by very authoritative people who have met Prince Charles on a number of occasions that he is very anxious to know will the opportunity ever arise where he could meet with me. And
no, you're very personable.
I have to say, if I am elected president of Ireland, I will be very glad to meet with him. I'm sure we'll have a very interesting conversation. He lost a loved one as a result of the conflict. I've lost
Lord Mountbatten.
People have been very close to me, but I don't think that's the reason why he wants to be.
According to Ed Maloney and Peter Taylor, you were chief of staff.
Ed Maloney, listen.
Ed Maloney, sorry.
I used to say to Ed Maloney, your name should be Ed Maloney.
Right.
I would take with a pinch of salt what Ed Maloney says, because he's absolutely prejudiced.
I suppose I have to ask you these questions, Martin. I have to, and these are serious questions.
Yeah.
Have you ever murdered somebody?
No.
Have you ever ordered somebody else to murder somebody?
No.
Have you ever been in a room where murders were discussed and you didn't stand up and say, don't do that?
No. But I was part of the IRA, and there were battles on the streets of Derry against the British Army at a time of mayhem. And I was involved in confronting the British Army and fighting against the British Army.
Okay.
But, I think I'm not distancing myself from the IRA. The fact is that I absolutely engaged with the IRA at very difficult times of the conflict, and indeed whenever the IRA done things that were wrong, spoke out against it. But the reality is that...
Do you know that old saying, I would never ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't do myself?
Yeah, well, I was on the streets of Derry and I fought against the British Army. I never asked anybody to do anything I wouldn't do myself. I've never denied that I was in the IRA and that I fought the British Army and the military forces of the state when I was there. Now, let's deal with how things have changed. There's an awful lot of focus on my involvement in the IRA, but what about my involvement in the peace process? What about my skills and ability to bring about a situation where
they're unquestioned by everybody? Yeah, and it is remarkable. It is remarkable, and we have to take this on board down the south, that you are now in power with the DUP.
Yeah.
And if they can accept you, why can't we?
I tell you this? The last time I was on the Late Late Show, I was invited on by Ryan Tubridy, and at the beginning of the show, Ryan Tubridy told the people, we'll have the Deputy First Minister of the North, and we're going to speak to him about his life as Deputy First Minister. The only thing he spoke to me about was the IRA. So, I think people need to be fair, and they need to recognise...
Well, I think we've given you... I allowed you to talk about the presidency.
I need to be seen... we haven't talked about my relationship with Ian Paisley or Peter Robinson. The fact that Ian Paisley said to me the first time we sat down, Martin, we can rule ourselves. We don't need these people coming over from England telling us what to do. And how the Democratic Unionist Party were effectively brought into the institutions as a result of a very important conversation I had with Tony Blair in the small sitting room in Downing Street in 2003.
I wonder how the families of the people who lost loved ones during the Troubles felt about seeing you and Ian Paisley laughing on the telly. I would imagine it'd stick in their craw. I
know, but journalists sometimes take it on themselves to speak for all those people.
And there's
I actually think some journalists try to use the plight of those who lost loved ones in the conflict for their own ends. But I can tell you for a fact, since my candidacy for the presidency has been announced, people have been on the public record who have lost loved ones, both from the unionist community and from the nationalist community, asserting their support for my contesting this election. And I actually think that's tremendous. I come out of Aldergrove Airport last Saturday week with Peter Robinson, and at least 3 members of the unionist community come over and said good luck in the election. That's how things have changed in the north. And I make the point, if I can make peace with Ian Paisley and with Peter Robinson and build bridges, as Mary McAleese said she wanted to do and did do on her first day as president, if I can do that, then I think it's not too much to ask some people here in the media who are critical of me, why do they not engage also in the art of peacemaking?
Yeah, I suppose I feel a responsibility, Martin, too, because I'm aware that for a lot of our listeners, they're in their 20s. They wouldn't be as knowledgeable as you are, obviously, because you're in the thick of it, of what happened in the north of Ireland. And there is that cloud of that stench of murder hanging over you. And that's what I wanted you to clarify for me and for them, because they have a vote. They're going to be asked to vote for you or somebody else on October 28th. Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that for them.
Yeah, but would you say the same if Tony Blair was sitting here? Would you say there's a stench of murder over him, over the invasion of Iraq? And the same with George Bush?
But they were very much once removed. I'm not condoning that in any way, but I'm saying you were in the thick of it. And I think the biggest criticism of you at the moment that I'm getting from our listeners is lack of honesty. That's what I'm getting.
Well, if that's the case, why would I be invited to meet so many people like Barack Obama on 3 occasions? Last time Nelson Mandela was in Dublin, I spent an hour with him. I don't think Nelson Mandela would bother his head talking to someone like me if he didn't think I was someone of value, or indeed as someone who had come through the same sort of struggle
but
that he came through in South Africa.
Can you in any way see people's problem with you in the South?
No, I can see that there are people in the South, and let's face it, some of them come from other political parties who are opposed to Sinn Féin, and who no doubt are phoning onto your programme this morning. I understand all of that, but I'm not afraid to debate with anybody the circumstances and the conditions that existed in the north of Ireland when the people that I come from, the community that I come from, were being treated like dirt by the British government and by unionists.
Martin is responsible for making history. He has done more for the country than all other candidates. Please let him finish answering your questions, and thanks for having him on the show. Well, I've done that. I really wish everyone would just move on, stop living in the past. He's clearly a gent. He's a fantastic peacekeeper and ambassador, says P in Dublin. And Eamon de Valera took up arms against the British. Should he not have been president? And don't get me started on Nelson Mandela. Martin is not abandoning people in the north of the country. He will be our president too. I think we should be allowed to vote. The president is a president for all Ireland. What's the long view? A lot of people have mentioned the centenary celebrations of the 1916 Rising, which is on the cards in 4 years' time. So if you're elected president, you would be in office.
Yeah, and I think all of that has to be handled very, very delicately and sensitively. There are also very important commemorations in the north of importance to the unionist community. So I think whoever is elected president would have to be very careful to ensure that we do that in a way that we don't destabilise the enormous progress that we've made through establishing the power sharing executive in the north, and indeed the all-Ireland institutions that we're now all part of.
What's the tagline before you go on the posters? What's the slogan?
Well,
what's your slogan?
The slogan is very, very clear. A people's president.
Right. Martin McGuinness, aspiring to be a people's president. Thank you for coming in and good luck in the campaign.